Hi, guys. This is Jose Vasquez for Baseball Strong. Welcome to another episode. Today, I got a dear friend, Dr. Ryan Crotin. I want to read this out because I want to get some of this stuff right. He has worked with elite throwers at every level of baseball. He served in professional baseball, worked in sports medicine and performance settings. He's currently executive vice president of the arm care device, one of the leading technologies being used to monitor arm health and performance in baseball. He has been in baseball at different levels and different capacities. I've met him many years ago, and I've followed his career and his passion for arm health. It's such a crucial part of the baseball world, and it's still a problem that we're still not able to solve. But I feel like some of his work has some answers, has some merit, and it's something that I really, really want people to listen and really check this stuff out. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, man. I'm so glad to be here. You know, I'm a big fan of yours. You're always, somebody who's, I think we're like very much the same with curiosity and wanting to do a lot in terms of bringing new knowledge to the sport. Um, as you were talking about this arm injury problem, it's just continually becoming more of an issue. I mean, when you're looking at the recent stats, you got, a 5% chance now, if you're an amateur, of having surgery. Okay. So every 100 players that we see, 5 of them are going to have an arm surgery. And that's really concerning for me, man. And one of the issues I think that's kind of revolving around it is the lack of individualization. You're seeing this in pitch counts, per se, for our kids. You can have a kid in the same age bracket and they have 2 different bodies. You got a kid who's 13, who's 6'2" and 185 pounds. And we see those guys that throw 90 plus miles an hour. And then you got another kid who is barely, touching 5'6", and they got the same, workload designations. And I think one of the things that's really important for us is we have to understand the responses to our workloads. We have to understand our responses to our training and really do as much as we possibly can do to customize it, and I think that's the mission for everybody in the game today with so many injuries that are happening. If you're not finding a way to individualize, to optimize, if you're generalizing, it's going to lead to hospitalizing our players.
Yeah, I like that. If you're not individualizing, you're hospitalizing. That's a good one. I might use that one in some of my talks. But before we get into the app and the device, the arm care device, tell me your story. How'd you got involved in baseball? I know you played a little bit, played different sports, had some injuries. So, give me a background on your baseball sport career, but also how it led you to the work that you're doing today.
Oh yeah. I think people who go into things and really dedicate themselves to it, it comes a lot from struggle. And my first, experience seeing what I'm doing now and how important it was when I was 11 years old. And I had an extreme case of little leaguer's elbow. And the surgeon who I went to see, I was 11 years old and I pitched for 11U, 12U, and 13U. I was a bigger kid. And could throw pretty hard. And my bones and ligaments, they were all in this developmental stage. And I nearly fractured my arm, making a long story short. And during the physical therapy part of it, and being told I'll never pitch again and those things, I started to see, I don't want this happening to other people. And I started to understand training, and I saw changes in my body, my posture, my strength. There were things I didn't even think about as an 11-year-old, the importance of having a strong core or having single leg balance even. These were motor control things I didn't even know about. And I started to invest a lot of time into learning about how to train from then on. And I felt really good when I was 13. I could bench press my body weight 8 times. And I started to realize I'm really strong. I'm squatting my dad on my back and all sorts of things. Got me into the performance side of the game, and we kind of grew up and, you're looking at baseball players and most people were laughing at them. Those guys are fat. They're out of shape, play sport like soccer. My kids are into soccer, so they are hyper athletes, but the game is now driven by athletic performance and, by the physicality of it. And now here's the other layer of taking, that experience in my life of having injury and now the explosive performance that I was able to see in my own career. And I played some independent league baseball, and then taking that into a major league level and seeing how incredibly gifted these athletes are in skill and physicality. And now we got a durability issue, right? Our players are now, outgrowing their throwing arm strength. They're highly, highly explosive at younger ages, and they don't have the body control, the consistency, and some of these things are so critical to come into. And so all of these things have really layered up to where I am in my career and how I've seen baseball, studying it at a PhD level, examining what are fatigue relations to injury risk. How does joint loading increase when we lose muscle capacity? And I always say strength matters most, and it's because it does. Seeing how injuries are more related to a stabilization issue than it is a tissue restriction problem, and being able to quantify it, and adding science to it has put me in a place now where I really feel I have a good understanding of why players get hurt, at least for the upper extremity, and even more so what it takes to get a player back to a higher level of performance after injury or preventing it in the first place.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we all get into our careers because of something that happened that makes us think or rethink some of the things we've been doing, and then we something piques our interest, and then we just follow that passion. For me, strength and conditioning was something that I felt like I wanted to get faster. I wanted to get stronger, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was hoping that it would help my baseball. Back then there was no such thing as a baseball strength coach. But it did. And I realized that being strong really matters. And just like you say, strength matters. I've always liked that saying because I was a beneficiary of strength. The stronger I got, the more athletic I got. And I really believe that my strength is what helped me become a better baseball player. My skill was so, but I really feel like if I wasn't strong as I was and fast as I was because of the strength training that I was doing, I don't think I would have made it very far. Arm health, you talked about individualization. I think anyone that goes on social media, everybody has a program. There's facilities everywhere. Selling velocity, selling arm health, selling, better performance. I'm partial to the arm care app. I'm partial to the device. It's very simple to use. As a physical therapist, a dynamometer is something that is very easy to use and reproduce. Let's talk about individualization, how you use the arm care app and device. Some of the things that you're finding, the research. I mean, I've done your certifications. I followed your research. For me, it makes sense. I'm a big proponent too of individualizing the movements. Sometimes you got to create exercises for some guys. It's, even though you may have some basic general strength exercises, but sometimes you have to modify and get creative. And you have a lot of creative exercises that I really like. So let's talk about individualization from your point of view, arm care device and app and that kind of program. I really, really want to touch on that.
Yeah. I mean, the key here is like, you have to measure what matters and you have to manage what you measure. And, the thing is people are kind of looking all over the place for what are the right things to capture. And most of the time we're looking at the ball. What is the ball doing? How's it spin? How's it break? The stuff grades, the speeds, the break charts. Like I might have said that already, but we're forgetting about the body, and we have to understand certain elements of are there imbalances? Some of them are very beneficial to a player. Others are not so healthy or helpful. For example, you're going to have imbalances in your rotation of your shoulder joint from a range of motion standpoint. Well, you need that because you have to lay back your arm. If it was restricted in being able to lay back, you're not going to throw very hard, right? But now when it comes to stability, if we don't know the strength components on either side of the arm, we have a hard time setting it in the right position. And like 99% of our injuries for our throwing arm are happening from when the maximum layback position is about to hit all the way to, after ball release, just that instant after. So there's a lot there of stability and mobility that has to be tracked. But even more so when I talk about, you got to measure what matters is that you have to understand how these muscles fatigue. Fatigue is the enemy. And for me, when I'm looking at creating throwing programs or training programs, and I have experts that we build around athletes in my personal business, RC13 Sports, we create high performance systems. We have to have a really good understanding of how do we recover our athletes? How do we set up the right design in the training week that's specific to their schedules and their needs so that we constantly have a higher level of fitness than we do fatigue? And you can only do that if you have objective measures on how an athlete's prepared going into high intensity bouts, which are competitive programming or bullpens. That's the highest form of training with adrenaline and body response and those kinds of things. But then we got to understand how are they responding to the work that's being done so that we craft not only the right approach competitively and also in their preparation, but in training. We have to train for recovery, right? And when we think about just taking a random program and I'm just going to squat, I'm going to bench, I'm going to deadlift and try to work on 2-foot, two-handed exercises, potentially stiffening a body or causing an athlete to come undone between segments, we're going to lose the opportunity to individualize that player and we could impact their efficiency. And that's a whole different game for individuality and training is our definition of efficiency. The one that I think is so clear to me and it's easy to see is how are they retaining strength? How is that strength bouncing back, right? And how are they managing fatigue? When you have a process, training, throwing programming, mechanical approaches, right? Sleep, nutrition, all these other things, psychology, all these elements that come together, you're efficient when you're seeing the nervous system really respond well. When the nervous system isn't responding well, there's inefficiency in what you're doing. And that way, you got to go look at what can I further individualize for the player. You give somebody a stock program, I see it all the time, the same throwing program, the same velocity enhancement program, the same weighted ball routine, and they got different imbalances. Or one guy's got a heavy exam schedule and he's at an Ivy League school. There is a major shift in how you need to manage that program. And so you have to measure what matters and you have to manage what you measure.
Yeah. So you mentioned something that I've been recently doing, and I think that you do that with your personal business. You said that you want to measure what matters. I think sometimes what people forget, and when they go to these facilities or when they go train with people, there's more to the exercise program. I really believe, and I've been seeing this now that I'm out of the game, and because I saw this in the game, your schedule matters. And so I work with a kid who's very elite, who is very on top of things. And one of the things that we did since October is we organized his week. We took his class schedule, his game schedule, whatever season it was, because we've been working for about 6 months now. And I just made his June travel ball schedule. He showed me his schedule, travel days, games, doubleheader here, doubleheader there. When can he plug in my lift? When should I do my arm care app? All that stuff. That's where I feel like a lot of people miss the boat. Because if I give a kid a program and he goes off and he plays for a month and he's traveling and he's going places, This kid is not going to know when to exercise. He's not going to know when to test his arm. He's not going to know when to recover, when to lift heavy, when to lift light, whatever. And that's where I think sometimes the individualization gets lost, because that's where I feel like most people fail. It's in their schedule. They don't know how to plan their lifestyle to manage fatigue, right? That sounds something like similar to what you do.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of resources. So at least with RC13 Sports, I had started that during COVID, because they furloughed my entire staff, and I found a way to connect major league coaches to amateurs. We're so frustrated that we
Mm-hmm.
lost those great people for that season. Only brought a few back, and after that, I said, you know what? That off season, I am going to build something here. And as you're talking about going over time, you're like, wow, man, these guys are going through high school and they've never used Google Calendar. They've never actually had to map those things out. And I think a hard thing for our athletes, and I'm like you, I'm very selective about the players we work with, and we do teamwork, and we create high performance systems for college teams and travel teams, and we're really focused, and we do that for facilities, and we're doing it at a high level for individuals. But the programming has an organization of the daily habits.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have to use a Google Calendar. You have to map in where your games are, when your exams are. If you're a college player or a high school guy, what's a high level load week versus low level? If we're creating a custom program for a player, and the guy's got 5 exams, and we want to hit an 85% effort training day in that week, their nervous systems are shot. They're barely sleeping. They're worried about,
Mm-hmm.
not getting A's. A lot of them are high achievers that we have come in. And so the schedule part is a big piece of it. But in the programming, like what you're saying, there's more than just the training. If someone was to see on our app how much our players have to do, it might scare them. But we're doing our best to build the habits
Mm-hmm.
that create the durability for them, that create the athletic performance, that blend in what they need to do mechanically. We do strength and coordination training, on addition to the arm care portions, the weight room portions, the speed development, the mobility, the soft tissue work, the circulation based work,
Mm-hmm.
right? The evening work, the hydration. All of these things have to be packaged in a way that the players can commit to them. But ultimately, we have to schedule them. If you're going to give a player something that's loose, at times it's like, hey, just get a couple lifts in a week, and it's not put in stone somewhere, or it's not reviewed in
Mm-hmm.
some kind of a player development plan. You not only are you talking about the monitoring data, you're constantly having conversations of scheduling. Hey, we're on a bus. We skipped our lunch spot. We're going to a convenience store
Mm-hmm.
for lunch, right? And we gotta navigate those things to the best of our ability, and we got to keep the players as accountable as we possibly can. And so, you're hitting the nail on the head. Like, the training, it's much more than training. If you want to be successful at it, it is creating a high performance system around an athlete that can handle the pressure testing of when things don't go well. For me, coming up with programming with players, there's always an A plan, but I got a B plan.
Mm-hmm.
I got a C plan. I got
Yes.
a pain plan. I got an injury plan. I got a fight with your significant other plan, a
Mm-hmm.
stress plan, a bad game plan, a confidence issue plan. Like, we have to connect those dots so that, our players can succeed.
Yeah.
And, when I see a player do something that's the same as 5 of their teammates, and it doesn't adjust and people aren't monitoring for them, that's one of the reasons, again, the generalization equals hospitalization. That's a problem, and getting with that, and you've seen it, and you know what it
Mm-hmm.
takes. You're giving one example of one player to really put them in a place that they can succeed, stay healthy, and advance,
Yeah.
advance themselves, especially in season. It's work.
Yeah.
It's work.
Yeah. And in today's world, there is so much baseball. And everywhere you go, there's camps, there's showcases, there's select teams everywhere. So if I'm a high school player, I look around. I was like, man, there's a lot of competition. If I want to make it to the next level, there's a lot of competition. Well, then you have to ask yourself, okay, how much am I willing to sacrifice in order to be elite? In order to be successful, it's about a lifestyle. It's not just about what exercises do I do or when do I do them, and that's only one part. And so if you want to be elite, that's another thing that I run into a lot, and that's why I don't have many clients. Is it's not about the program. It's not about the program. It's about, can you plug in that program in your lifestyle, and can you make adjustments to your lifestyle so that that program can take shape, so that that program will work, so that the strength will take, the range of motion, whatever it is. So, if they don't have the lifestyle and dedication that I think it's going to take for this thing to work, I sometimes just say, you know what, I'll give you the program, but I'm not sure if this is going to work for you. Because if you're not willing to change your
I would
life,
even,
I don't think this is
I
going
would
to work.
even stop it right there. I would even stop it right there because, here's the thing. We want for any of our athletes, anybody we work with, is to experience what we worked in our career with,
Yes.
those major league opportunities, the accolades, the all-star games. I went to the playoffs. You won a World Series. We want our players to have that. The other thing is there's sacrifice. Hey, I got a tournament tomorrow and I might have to pitch the first game, of a doubleheader and come out and play shortstop in the second. And all my buddies want to play in a video game tournament and they're all in teams all over in every state. Can I sacrifice that so I don't wear out my forearm flexors for the next day? Right? Athletes, you'll see some that have such a very high level endorsement from coaches. Hey, you got to come work with this guy. He's so amazing. He's hitting 95. He's 15 years old. And then when you meet them and you talk to them, you don't find them competitive. You just don't find them competitive in everything they do. And knowing where you were with major league players, hey, if there's a ping pong table in there, guys want to beat each other. If it's, you're running 30s and maybe you're not even doing time 30s in spring training, you got the odd rookie that wants to go against an older guy because it's ingrained in their competition. And the older guy, they're kind of like, yeah, he's prepared for it. But do you want him running, a 30-yard sprint at 100% the second day of spring training? He's a competitor. So there's all sorts of things, I think, that we're kind of getting things wrong in the high performance industry. Are we evaluating our athletes enough, to know that they really want it, because there's just so much you got to sacrifice to be good. And there's almost everything to sacrifice to be great. And we got to look for players that are committed, focused, not distracted, not taken away by social media. They can deflect people who are trying to bully them. They can deflect coaches that don't think much of them. They can handle being cut. They can handle when they lose. They can go back to the drawing board. They can see what it's like to be a leader. We need those athletes because the other thing that COVID did is that it's putting athletes in an autonomous position. My business, a lot of them, maybe not the same as yours, but it's all working in a remote space. And there's advantages and disadvantages of that. When I look at an athlete, hey, is he a self-starter? Is he motivated? Does he need someone to pull him to the gym to get him to do the work? Does he need his dad too much to do everything? Right? That's why the young players only have a few young players who are under the age of 16, but they're on a draft profile. They're serious. And to me, it's like, man, I can go to bed at night knowing they'll do the work. And when you're offering something to players, I think in this age that you don't know if they're going to do the work and you're kind of gulping at it and you're like, man, great talent. Don't know if the work ethic is there. Don't know if they got the pain of sacrifice. What happens is we're now in the pain of disappointment. One, that kid gets hurt. And if he's a high level player that pitches all the time, that everybody wants him, and he throws beyond 4 or 5 standards of deviation for his average velocity at his age. I'm talking a 12-year-old that's touching 91, right? And I see them, 12 and 13 years old. The pain of disappointment is he gets an early surgery. And
Mm-hmm.
what people don't understand, the early surgery, you got 4 years, and that's as a pro.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. As an amateur throwing that hard, you could have less time before you have a second.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a college kid, well, man, shoot, you have a college Tommy John surgery, and you got a chance that you're going to have another one in 5 years as a pro and might miss your arbitration. So all of these disappointments, they add up. And at the end of the day, what hurts, because I know what you're like, Jose, and you know what I'm like, is that we get disappointed in ourselves for not catching this earlier. The investment of time that we're putting in is not the same amount of investment of care and concern that the player has. And so when we're talking about ourselves in this high performance community and what we offer, our athletes have to be thinking high performance. They have to want high performance, and they have to want to commit, like what you're saying, to all facets that allow for high performance, and when we have that, man, that pain of sacrifice is going to go way high, and that pain of disappointment for our guys is going to go way low, and we're going to alter, the injury statistics by doing that.
Yeah. I know it. I mean, lot of good stuff there, and I hope that the people listening get a lot of this, because one of the reasons that I've been doing these interviews is because I want baseball people to be inspired by the people that I'm talking to, whether it's their upbringing, whether it's their injury history, whether it's the technology that they offer, and the wisdom, the perspective that they bring, because a lot of what our kids lack in this game today is perspective. If I don't get a hit, then I'm not a good hitter. No, well, you hit a line drive, you hit the ball square, you got good backspin on that pitch, like whatever. It's having perspective. And so I hope that while a lot of these interviews, I give people, parents, high school athletes, perspective about the game, so that hopefully my goal, my hope is that people have a better experience in baseball than I did growing up. Growing up, I didn't have much training. I had to figure out a lot of things on my own, and so I'm hoping that I can bring kids and the families that are invested in this better information, better education. One of the things that you mentioned earlier, I wish that I had a camera and had a behind the scenes kind of celebrity show type of thing of what goes on in a major league clubhouse all year, or the training that they do, and the conversations that these guys have, and the way they think, the way they act. Obviously, I have my favorites, but the reality is to get to that level, there's a special kind of person, and it's not just talent. There's a lot of other factors that we all have, that we can all develop to become that kind of person, that kind of athlete. So, great perspective on all that stuff. So, let's talk about a little bit about the velocity, the fascination with velocity. What are some of your thoughts? What are some of your suggestions, and some of the work that you do, and just highlight a little bit about this fascination that we all have with velocity?
Yeah, I mean, velocity for me is essential. Anybody who is out there saying, man, our guys throw too hard, and it's the reason for all our injuries. I don't mean to say anything critical of that, but what do you want them to do? Throw underhand?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just not happening.
Yeah.
Right? Guys aren't going to get drafted. Guys aren't going to be recruited if we're not hunting to improve the velocity of our pitchers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the question is, we have to do it safer. Mm-hmm. And we already talked about, let's measure what matters. Let's manage what we measure, right? And understanding when to hit the gas, when to idle and hit the brakes is really important. And for me, when it comes to velocity, and when I know I got a lock on it, it comes down to three things. And I constantly look at all our analytics around these three things: feel, function, and form. Okay? Feel is, what are the availability metrics that may be changing with velocity enhancement? Function, what is the nervous system and the physical qualities that I can objectively measure? How are they responding to an athlete that I'm putting on a certain process to raise their velocity enhancement? And the third is form. And form meaning, are they proficient? And proficient to me is, are they efficient and consistent? And where we're having problems with this velocity, and when I watch it, and you can see it, you look on social media, there's tons of videos, and you'll see a radar gun guy hitting 101, and the ball's way up here, and the ball's over here, and here, and here, and here. We're losing proficiency. We're increasing intensity before capacity. And I got that world flipped. We need the capacity, then intensity. And you'll be interested to see, when you have that capacity, you have consistency, because you're able to manage your fatigue levels. And then, doing all the measurements, understanding where are the breakdowns in the chain, and fixing those breakdowns in the chain, you can add their velo. Now, this is going to sound crazy, but in professional baseball, having guys from the age of 16 all the way to 38, there's zero correlation that I could find in 10 years between a max effort anything in our traditional sense of training, right? Squat, bench, deadlift, and velocity potential. I had 16-year-olds that were throwing 95. I had 38-year-olds throwing 95. Different body types. And the thing is that, like, we have to find out what's individually correct for each athlete. You take a stiff moving guy and you want to add more stiffness, it doesn't help it become more efficient. You take a very loose mover that maybe not be able to create enough stiffness, well, then stiffening type training makes sense. You're looking at all these things. Athletes got to work on diagonal patterns, and those things have to be proficient. If an athlete can't perform exercise on one leg, unbalanced, but we want them to run a zillion miles an hour to brace and fall forward and throw to something at the max capacity, without control, we got problems, right? It's not even the weighted balls that people are like is the demon and the devil. It's the process around them. It's the individualization around them. It's the lack of organization of all stakeholders, right? So we're going on this velocity tangent. Most of our kids, they got 2 pitching coaches, a pitching specialist, a strength coach, a hitting coach, because they're two-way. They got all these people. That's why I like managing a system around them. So there's consistency. And that's one of the problems. There's inconsistency. What happens if a guy has a max effort training day, the day before a guy has a max effort throwing day, and 2 days later, the guy's expected to start and throw 100 pitches, and he's 15. Right? And I'm getting really wild and passionate about it, but these are the kids I get who get injured coming to me, where I feel like, darn, man, those parts are tough. So, like, I really, I'm really focused, and I think we need to be focused not on demonizing velocity. Now, there's some weighted ball things you got to have some consideration for. Like, these are growing bodies. Your elbow, your shoulder, those things aren't going to really be fully unionized until the athlete's in their early 20s, to be honest. Baseball players have so much distraction force. These parts of the bones, they take a while to be mature anyway. So you got to have care with it. But there's a lot of processes involved. And we treat every athlete like a Ferrari. And you're not putting a Ferrari on an F1 track if the tires aren't looking good. You got a heart, it's tough to put the keys in the ignition. That guy's waking up and he's stiff and sore from whatever he might have done a few days ago. And the lack of scheduling, as we talked about, and planning, those are the problems. And in science, the reality, there's one study that has truly predicted a velocity effect on Tommy John rates, which is where my expertise is. And at that level, if you took out height and weight from the prediction and just looked at pure velocity, those injury rates are only predicted at 4% at that level. So 4% of Tommy John injury rates are predicted by velocity. That means there's, without height and weight, if you took those out, because that adds to 7. So let's just say, you're putting height and weight and velocity together, you got a 7% prediction of what happens to a Tommy John situation. That's 93% of other factors that are causing this to happen. And those other factors, right, are the lack of detail to things like feel, function, and form in that potential fatigable, training situation where you want maximum velocity. And that's when you can kind of, if you're talking about F's, you can F a guy up if you don't get that all right.
Yeah. So you made me think of a question that I had a while back, and I talked a little bit about it on a podcast. Players go off, in the off season. I've had this happen to me several times with different guys. They go off to a facility to gain velocity. They come back. They have gained 2-3 miles an hour, only to lose it 2-3 months down the road during the season, and or get hurt. How, when you gain velocity, what would you say is what it takes to maintain that velocity gained in an off season? Because in my experience, I've seen guys go off for 3 or 4 months, come back with velocity, only to lose it 2-3 months later and or get hurt.
Beauty. Great question.
You know what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying, right? Mm-hmm.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
I get those players, right? Yeah. I get them. Again, the generalization plan is what leads to these hospitalization issues. But when you talk about performance declines, everybody thinks you do a velo enhancement program. You got 3 options. Velocity goes up, no change. Velocity goes down because you get injured, right? Or it doesn't sustain. And that's because there is a change in throwing arm power. This will make sense for you because, we're in this sports science world, but power is force times velocity, right? Throwing arm force and throwing arm velocity are somehow not working in optimization. The other thing is throwing arm length. And what I mean by that, it's the length of the tissues. Is there a restriction in actually loading those tissues, right? And what happens too, and this is something I monitor and have been forever, is the arm strength to velocity ratio. So are we forceful enough for how fast we're throwing? And sometimes what happens, the force goes down, the velocity goes up, and we're getting our velocity from potential biomechanical compensations. Could be increased rotational speed to try to get that arm to move. It's coming from stretching tissues that aren't really meant to be stretched all that much, ligaments and capsules. Your tendons work and your muscles work, but we're losing potentially that force recoil, right? The other thing is stabilizing an actual throwing position. If my arm is doing this and my arm is going to be changing in its layback position, and some days it's 160 degrees, some days it's 180 degrees, some days it's 170 degrees, right? And I'm changing that part of my motor control, you're going to have those issues. The detraining effect is also important, and the other thing too is our brains are really wired. And I think it comes from a few things. The potential of when we're kids and the activities we do. Some athletes are more front body. You could have a guy who's a backstroke swimmer or a gymnast like I was and say, I'm giving it up. And they're very strong in the posterior side for who they are, right? And those things could become unwired. So now all of a sudden we're really front side of the body. We get a program that's working on the back side of the body. We get put into a place where we're balanced. And then all of a sudden we take the foot off the gas, and then we go back into our natural predisposed, motor activation pattern, right? That happens. A lot of things that happen where velocity isn't maintained, man. It's, and this happens. Guys work so hard in the off season. They get back with a team, a college team, a pro team, and they don't want to do anything that they were doing in the off season. Say that we're going to can that. We're going to change the way you throw. I got so many stories of guys doing well in the off season, coming back in season when we get them, and we want to change them because the arm action changed. Is more the ball flight has changed, right? And there's that inconsistency of the people who did the work and the people who are now owning the player at different parts of the year. Yeah. That's another reason why the thing I do, being previous inside the walls of a major league team, and also having, a strong understanding of now the private sector and being able to connect both is important. A player showing up without a player development plan and insight in terms of what was happening with that player coming to a team is a problem. And everyone wants to hold information like, they have the holy grail. I'd love to think that I got some of that, but we hurt the player. If you don't give the information, we hurt the player.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the times, this like elite velocity enhancement throwing program that's been contained and held by the company, now they go to the player and the player is like, well, I'd love to still do what I'm doing there because I'm up 8 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I feel really good. My data looks great. And that team has nothing to go by. They're like, yeah, I called them. They don't want to give it to us. Well, now what happens, that players in that situation, the velo declines come, the player gets hurt,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, who gets blamed?
Yeah.
Generally, if it's inside the walls of the major league team, they're blaming the company that has worked with them to
Mm-hmm.
increase their velocity, right?
Yep.
And you're in the company and people are like, dude, what happened to your guy? Well, what are you doing? You're blaming the MLB
Mm-hmm.
team because they didn't get to do your plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of lack of respect for the player drives me crazy. And it's a communication issue.
Mm-hmm.
Like these issues are observation, communication, right? The implementation strategy of how do you do what you're evaluating, communicating about, how you do it. But the other thing is the evaluation of what you do. And sometimes our egos get in the way rather than the team coming in with the player and saying, I want to know everything about this because you're looking really good.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it's like, it's not mine. I'm not evaluating it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it.
Yep.
Or vice versa. Player leaves, they have a really good season, and the player is generally closer, with the person they have outside of the team.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality. Now that I'm outside of the team, I have closer relationships with players than I do inside of it. And what can happen is that lack of communication, that player leaving, going to their private guy, and they know what's going on with the team. Like if you think, you got, you're keeping something in the crystal ball, no chance. The public eye knows.
Mm-hmm.
The player knows what you've been doing with them.
Mm-hmm.
They're communicating. And when there's at odds, this is where the player suffers.
Yeah.
They go through these hot and cold patches.
Yeah.
Super high velo, in season, crash and hurt, right? And if there was consistency and, we are working on capacity, then intensity, right? Now we're working on movement proficiency, before movement velocity.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have an opportunity to hold that performance, and that helps everybody, right? And that, that takes work from people.
Mm-hmm.
That takes the kind of work that a lot of people don't want to do, and that's where it suffers, that's part of the velocity rant. But all those things are a breakdown, and to just look at somebody and say, well, they throw hard, they're going to blow up. We used to say there's only enough bullets in the chamber, or it's the cost of doing business when they go into a velo program. That's not true. That is not true at all. The cost of doing business is the time to put in to creating an unbelievable plan for a player. The cost it takes to have multiple people to check each other and have analysts that are assigned to players to make those changes, right? It's the cost of time to get on the horn and say, hey, Jose, I really want to know more about, so-and-so who you brought to me. I see, there's a lot of changes in him. The programming, he's jumping through the roof, but his arm's, really weak. I wonder what happened there. Like, have an open dialogue to put the time in to help those players is all associated, with the costs, right? And that's the reason why we're seeing a lot of things fail, is that we're not doing all the work that's necessary to protect our athletes, right? We have to do that. They're bigger than ever, and it's without steroids. I'm telling you, I can find a 12-year-old kid in our national team that's bigger than me, almost weighs as much as me. I'm 218 pounds, 12 and 13 years old. And it takes a lot for us now to protect our kids, because their abilities are so high at such a young age that you got like 13-year-olds who have Division I arms, right? Like, it's just insane. You're throwing 85 miles an hour now. It's hard to get into a Division I program. When I was playing, those guys were they were wanted. We were seeing low 80s arms at the Division I level.
Yeah.
Now these guys they're bringing it. So we have to have way better risk detection, individualization, communication, right? And put the athlete in a place where they can inform us. We want to control everything. An athlete having data, having a process, having an ability to say, I can keep myself healthy and be the best version for you, for me, for him, for everybody, because this is what I've been, educated to do, and get that out in the open. That's a winner for everybody, man.
Yeah.
And it's not the velocity radar gun demon.
Yeah. So I want to try to summarize all that you said, because you said so many good things. So I want to highlight some of the things that I heard for the parents, especially for the parents, because I really think that in my world now, I'm focusing with the high school guys. Parents are very involved, and I think it's important for the parents to educate themselves, listening to conversations like this, because I feel like with all the information, all the teams that your kids play on, high school, select ball, disc showcase, whatever, you, the parent, need to be the advocate for your child, and you need to be I think you have to be educated more than ever, because when you go out there, not everyone you run into has the same intentions that you do. Some people, perhaps like Ryan and I, we're aiming to do this for the right reasons, for the benefit of the player. There are a lot of people out there who are doing it for the money, that do it for just to get as many numbers in the camp, get as many numbers in the facility. So you don't know the intention. So in my opinion, as a parent, you need to listen to conversations like this about what really happens with elite players, so that you can make better decisions. So when it comes to selecting a velocity program, you want to make sure that, like Ryan said, they're working on capacity, making sure that your child has the work capacity to be able to repeat that delivery, maintain that velocity, have a system of testing on a regular basis, where you see progress, where you see that shoulder is maintaining the strength and is managing the fatigue throughout. Someone who is going to take the time and energy to make phone calls and ask you about your schedule, and perhaps, or ask you about your family schedule. What is your schedule for the summer? How many games are you playing? How many tournaments? Okay, well, perhaps this program that we're doing is not suited for you. Maybe we need to do a modified program. So you, as a parent, when you go out there looking for places to train for your child to gain velocity, gain strength, gain what, you got to find these types of information. You got to find people like Ryan and I, who are would rather take less people, would rather take more time with your child than to grow a factory of baseball players. Um, I prefer the individualization type of work, because I feel like it is so difficult to include all the things that Ryan and I have just talked about: the scheduling, the diet, the sleep, and stuff like that. It's really hard to capture that in a group setting. It's really hard to work on that when you're working in a facility or you go into a group training session. So, in my experience, at my point in my career, I rather spend more time individualizing than generalizing. I already done the general stuff, and but if you're a parent interested in individualizing, you got to find people who are going to take the time to assess and evaluate your whole lifestyle, not just give you a program. Um, hey, great conversation, Ryan. Anything you want to add, or I want you to, promote the RC13, the arm care work that you do. Kind of give us some of the things you're working on. Give us some information on where people can find you, and some of the things that you're doing.
Yeah, man, it's been so busy. The social media part, I've been really focused on on arm care, armcare.com. We're putting out a lot more videos, a lot more quick hits. Learning about, the aspects of durability, health, training, the conflicts that we have in the game today. And that's an easy place, to interact and find us. Right. But RC13, I've been so busy with players and teams. I haven't put a lot out there. You can reach out to us on Instagram. But it's probably easier if you wanted to email rc13sports.com. So info@rc13sports.com. It's easy to get to one of our people. You ask questions. And, we really love tough baseball problems. You got to really just, be serious about it. We need our athletes to be serious.
Mm-hmm.
Our coaches are getting more serious. You're a serious guy.
Yeah.
I'm real serious about it, and to be very focused on each individual athlete having the best experience possible on the field.
Yeah, I know. Man, hey, once again, Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're busy, probably traveling and doing things, so thanks again. Hey, guys, there you have it. Dr. Ryan Crotin, a wealth of knowledge when it comes to arm care health. Check out a lot of his information. You can find a lot of his information at armcare.com, and his business is RC13 Sports. If you want to reach him, I'm going to add the links below. Follow him on Instagram. He has a lot of good content when it comes to arm care and arm health. He's a guy that I've worked with and I've worked alongside many years. Big fan of his work. I really, if you're a parent, if you're an athlete, if you got questions about arm health, you want to know anything about what it takes to gain fastball velocity, how to take care of your arm, how to design programs, you want special exercises, he's got them. Arm Care app, armcare.com. Check it out. Once again, thank you for watching. Always looking forward to bringing better content, better people, always looking to make better baseball players. Thank you so much for watching. This is Jose Vasquez for Baseball Strong.